Welcome back. You're watching Countdown on Bloomberg Quint Live. We have Yash Upadhyay, who's now joining us on the Fab4 stocks of the day. Yash, good afternoon. What do you have on your list?
Good afternoon, Agam. So first up, we have Manali Petrochem. This one had reported a spectacular set of numbers, and the stock is locked in a 20% upper circuit. Their revenues rose 26% to 190 crores. Their net profit almost quadrupled, while their margins, they have gone from a number of 7.5% to over 20%. Reliance Communication, this one doesn't quite feature a lot on our Fab4 list, but it is up 47% today on the back of reports doing the rounds that the company is in talks with Ericsson for an out-of-court settlement. Granules India had missed out narrowly to a Fab4 spot yesterday to Glenmark Pharma, but it's up today and it gained more than 10% after the company said that it has received the US FDA approval for a new product for the treatment, for the prevention and control of postpartum hemorrhage. It's an added positive for the company because it's their first product approval from their US facility. And finally, we're also looking at Future Enterprises. This one's up 10.5% today after nearly 11.5 lakh shares changed hands in a big bulk deal earlier in the day. We'll keep you posted with who the buyers and sellers are once the bulk deal data gets updated post-market does. Back to you.
You were spoiled for choice today, weren't you, Yash? So many options.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks for putting that into perspective, Yash. There's a bunch of stocks which were very, very active. Before we get in our next fundamental guest on board, Jay Bala, a word, I mean, there's so many requests on social media for getting this query of you. Crude, and a very good call there, Jay. Now at 80, I mean, if you still have a trading call there, but two more importantly, what would happen to some of the oil sensitives? OMCs, for example, do you track them on the charts?
Yeah, I do. I'm very negative on OMCs, and it's you've been very generous in appreciating me. Thanks very much. No, but the thing is, as things stand, I think there's a good possibility that Brent is going to pull back from somewhere close to 81, but it's not done its final leg. I see at least 87 to 90, which will complete the final leg of the move. But we need to see a pullback that lasts about 5 trading sessions from here on. That will be a good correction and a re-entry point for people who missed out the move when it was trading about 54, 55 in November. As far as OMCs are concerned, to put it very simply, I see BPCL coming down to where HPCL is, HPCL coming down to where IOC is. Now, that's the kind of negativity I have on the OMC companies. But take it in a few days at a time. Use every 1 to 1.5 day bounce in these OMCs as a shorting opportunity, and these are good trading bets on the short side.
Okay, just want to address what's happening with some of these ADAG stocks. We have a surge in Reliance Communication, which is now up nearly 50%. And this is quite a surge. It's largely on account of the build-up in volumes that we've seen over the last 15, 20 odd minutes. And that is the same when it comes to Reliance Naval. Reliance Naval is also up and about. That's also advancing by as much as 29%. Though do remember, both these stocks are in the trading in their 20s. So while Reliance Communication trades at around 15.5, Reliance Naval is at around 16.5. We'll have to wait and watch as to what are the triggers that are leading these stocks higher from these levels. That said, Abhijit, I do want to address some of these stocks to you. I know that these are extremely risky bets to take, but given the kind of momentum we've seen build in both these counters over the last half an hour or so, what would you recommend traders to do, or would you actually ask them to avoid taking any positions in these stocks?
Between these stocks, I think Reliance Infra can move from here because it has not yet moved today. But if it crosses 410 on futures, it can go towards 430 or 440. Reliance Infra.
Interesting. Hari, T.S. Hari, of course, Chief Executive and Founder at HRBV Client Solutions, joins us on the show. Very difficult to take a call on what an ADAG group stock will do any other given day, Hari, but let me ask you the question nevertheless. What do you do here?
See, I think the only thing to do in a ADG stock is once it comes down to that single-digit level, you just start buying it. And we have followed this strategy in the past.
You have.
We have, and not much of fundamentals to really talk about.
Right.
But I've always been saying this one thing, that the entire Ericsson issue is about $160 million, and the sale value is about $3.8 billion. So I think logically, what I would say is, okay, I'll sell it to you for $4 billion and pay some $160 million out of that. So I don't think Ericsson should really be a kind of a game changer, or what I would say, a kind of a game disruptor as far as Arcom is concerned. And that is something we've always been saying from the beginning. So I think the reason why it crashed down to 10 is not clear. I think it was more because of the NCLT issue and the fears that probably it'll have to go into liquidation. But I think those are anyway unfounded in the first place. And I would believe that probably Arcom should now get back to its old level of about 25-30.
Right, Mr. Hariyar, there is a surge in graphite-facing stocks again today, and we've really seen a lot of strength here. How do we go about this particular sector, especially given so much volatility over the previous few months?
I think that's a slightly more structural story. We have seen a lot of demand from arc furnaces. I think steel output is going up in a big way, and we've just seen yesterday that there's a massive expansion that the likes of JSW and others are planning. So I would believe that the entire graphite story is slightly more structural and long term. And notwithstanding all the volatility that you get to in the short term, I think it's a structurally a very, very long term positive play.
7.5% higher for Graphite India. HEG2, I'm sure, is making all the merry moves today. 8% for Bajaj Finance at 2,083. This is 1 lakh crores of market cap, moving up 7 or 8%. It's not 4,000 or 5,000 crores of market cap, though. One could argue this season, Hari, that or this earnings season, that it is the 1 lakh crores which are moving. Yes, Axis. Yes, it's not 1 lakh crores, but Axis, ICICI, and some of the others. But 8.5% for Bajaj Finance. For somebody, Hari, who's perennially waited for the stock to come down, has not been able to buy, and is looking at it and feeling left out, would there be some multi-year growth ahead which could bring these valuations down to a more reasonable level when the growth numbers come in? And therefore, is it advisable to check into Bajaj Finance at these levels?
See, frankly, there is no, I would say, right level to buy a stock like Bajaj Finance, assuming that the stock is able to maintain its 25% growth quarter on quarter.
Are you assuming that it will?
It has been doing. Whether it will or not is hard to say, but if you look at the last probably 16 or 20 quarters, it has actually been delivering 25% quarter-on-quarter growth. So I don't think there is any reason for me to doubt that they would be able to do this in, at least in the next 2 or 3 years. I believe they should. So from that perspective, I think the current valuations at 2,000 or 2,000 plus don't really seem to be too stretched, because let's not forget that Bajaj Finance has been in the range of 1,700 to 2,000 for a fairly long time. I would believe at least 4 to 5 months it has been in that range. So I think from that perspective, I would believe that valuation is not too stretched. One can argue that NBFC valued at 1,10,000 crores, but I think it's a company that has delivered low NPS, great growth in profits, I think phenomenal growth in top line. And today if you go to any retail market in India, the only financer that you see on top of the mind is Bajaj. So I would believe that yes, it seems to be a very good story. Probably the returns may not be as stunning as what it was the last 10 years, but it definitely appears to be a very good story from here too.
Okay, well, I do want to address another pocket in the market. We've seen a lot of volatility in the Nifty Media Index itself over the past 3 or 4 days. But there's one stock that stands out in that particular index, and it's Sun TV. If you consider the returns on the last 5 days for Sun TV, you'll see that it's gained 15% against the decline of around 0.5% for the entire media index. Jay, if I can come to you on the media stocks and perhaps specifically Sun TV, how are you viewing trade here? Is there momentum that can be bought into at this point in time for Sun TV?
Yeah, Sun TV is looking good on the charts, and I think it's likely to take out the record highs past 1,080. I think it's going somewhere close to 1,200, but the risks are a bit elevated because you have to place a stop somewhere below 850. So that is not that a low risk, I would say, but the momentum is still strong. I think it's bound to make at least one more 52-week high beyond the highs it made in January.
Okay, my production team has just lined up a bunch of these nifty gainers on one of our pillars, and if you can just see the point that I think we're trying to make, look at the set of gainers and you will see the kind of impact that the Bajaj twins are making versus some of the others. So Bajaj Finance, Finserv, northwards of 5% apiece, and then the rest, about 1%, 1.5%, say for Coal India, just shows the extent of dominance that the Bajaj twins, the Sanjeev Bajaj Group twins, let me qualify my statement, are doing in the session today. That said, it's not just that. Agam's spotlight today, Jyothy Labs is now up a whole 20%. Incidentally, 1% beverages and Parag Milk Foods too have gained. And Nestle India is at 9707. You heard the management a bit later on earlier in a conversation with Menka doing well, talking about that as well. And that stock too is doing well. Come in, Hari, on some of these names. Normally people don't usually talk about 1% beverages in the same vein as the Haylord stocks. Parag Milk comes and goes, but more as just another stock as opposed to something that is creating serious wealth. What are your thoughts here? Two different businesses, but if you track them.
Well, I look at both these stocks, Manpasan and I would say Parag. See, the whole problem is that when you look at the food space in India, I think there's an absolute shortage of stocks. If you leave out the Nestle's, the Britannias, and part of Hindustan Lever, there's really no, I would say, genuine food stocks. So, whatever the food stocks available, be it in agrotech foods or be it heritage foods, most of them are almost quoting at actually sky-high valuations. No, I think that is more a case of, I would say, a demand-supply mismatch. And what we are getting to see in Parag Foods or probably even 1% beverages is that, one, there is a huge unsatiated demand as far as food companies are concerned. Number two, I think the GST classification that was done for food products about 7-8 months back, I think that is yet to be factored into most of these prices. So while a Nestle or a Britannia has benefited, I think the Parag Foods and the 1% haven't benefited from that. So I think it's probably kind of a catch-up that they're playing. I would still believe that if you want to look at food, look at the more established names. But yes, a lot of these people could be doing a catch-up in the next few months.
Okay, well, I also want to address what's happening with Asian Paints. Now, the earnings came through, and we had solid numbers in also. And we've had Asian Paints advance by up to the levels of around well over 1320. Today is the first day and snapping its 4-day gaining streak. I actually want to do a chart check on Asian Paints. Abhijit, if I can come to you on Asian Paints, currently trading at 1309. How would you trade in this particular counter? Earlier in my show, there were some traders out there who had sold the 1320 and the 1340 calls. Would that be a right move for Asian Paints, or do you still see some strength coming in?
No, the Asian Paints seems it might take a pause and might correct a bit. It's a bit risky to go long at this stage now. It might go maybe even below 1300 or maybe in 1250.
Okay, so that's the verdict. Finally, before we let Jay Bala go, Jay, any closing strategies?
Yeah, you need to look at IT stocks. IT stocks are coming close to supports, and the CNX Nifty and index is unlikely to fall below 13,100, and probably the next leg of the up move is starting for the IT stocks. So you might be better off positioning on the CNX IT index with a stop below 13,200.
With a stop below 13,200, you're going long. This is what period of trade is this? Is it a positional trade for the next few days?
Yeah, it's definitely a positional trade, and I expect the highs made post the TCS results. That highs are likely to be taken out from a 1 to 2 months time frame.
Okay, Jay, many thanks for joining us today and giving us that perspective. Really appreciate your time. While we are at it, just before we get to dealing rooms, Abhijit Pathak, are you taking a trade on any of the IT names?
Yes, TCS looking good. Only thing is stop loss is a bit lower, maybe 3,400 or 3,420 on the futures. So if there's a dip, because right now it's above 3,500, so it's a bit risky to, the stop loss is quite far away. So I would wait for a dip and then go long in TCS.
All right, hold that thought, Abhijit. It's time for us to now take a look at what the dealer rooms are suggesting and what kind of trends they're throwing up. We have Yatin Mehta and Darshan Mehta joining us to give us the channel checks. Should we start with Yatin then? Yatin, it's over to you.
You want Yatin Mehta or Yatin Mehta?
I want Yatin Mehta.
So, Sun Pharmaceuticals, that is one stock wherein dealers are indicating that domestic funds are said to be buyers in trade today. Of course, the stock has corrected significantly and is trying to bounce back from the recent low. So, dealers are hopeful of some short-term bounce back as far as this pharma name is concerned. And in general, pharma has been looking at some bounce back in trade today on a general basis. ITC, that stock is not doing well. Of course, yesterday they reported the quarterly earnings. They met analyst expectations, but still there is some pressure on the stock, and dealers do indicate a STBT kind of a strategy as far as ITC is concerned, which is sell today, buy tomorrow. And Welspun India, that is one stock which is on the HNI radar. Stock is flat in trade. They reported the quarterly earnings, but look at the volumes, nearly 36 lakh shares traded. So good HNI action is seen as far as this stock in the textile space is concerned. But Darshan has a few more stocks to talk about.
Yeah, so I think the stock of the day, no doubt, has to be Bajaj Finance. It's up almost 8%, pretty much at the highest point of the day. Couple of things, dealers expect that the strong momentum will continue, trading at new record highs, so that on the technical side, that's very positive. But overall, they expect EPS upgrades, estimates upgrades to come in from analysts tomorrow. That probably will propel the shares even further. LG Equipment is another counter which dealers indicate that some of the HNIs are very, very active. Not a very highly traded, volumes are not the highest, but has managed to come up almost 10% over the past few weeks. So there is enough traction that's happening on the counter. And the final stock is JSW Steel. No doubt the numbers were good, but the counter has managed to come down by over 1.5%. Some of the domestic funds are actively accumulating this counter at lower levels, so that's what is being spoken about.
Okay, we will watch out for these names as well. Thanks a lot for that, Darshan Mehta. Okay, Hari, metal names had a bit of a rally, I believe, ahead of the numbers. Maybe that's one reason why they've cooled off a little bit post the numbers too. But what did you make of the numbers? What would you use this weakness and these numbers from a long-term perspective? If you want to buy a large cap, would you use this to buy the metal names?
I would believe yes. See, Tata Steel was a different ballgame. I think they had a one-time write-back which actually was responsible for the increase in profits. But JSW, I think it was a genuine growth in profits that we saw, about a 3 or 4 time growth in profits. I think both JSW and Tata Steel, I wouldn't put SAIL in the same league, but I think both JSW and Tata Steel are going for one of the biggest expansions that they've been planning over the next probably 4 to 5 years. I think Tata Steel would be about 27 million tons, JSW will be about 26 million tons. So we are going to see a massive expansion of capacity, and I think the way steel demand is going to pan out in India, we are going to see a massive offtake of steel domestically. Forget about the global recovery that's anyway happening. So I would believe that steel stocks are in a very sweet spot. So be it JSW at 330 or Tata Steel at 600, I think both of them look to be extremely, extremely well poised. So I would probably go in and buy both these stocks at these prices.
Mr. Hariyar, we've been talking a lot about the agrarian stocks or agricultural facing stocks given, well, the expectation of monsoons. Anything that stands out for you in this area?
See, quite a few of them. In fact, we are looking at quite a few themes. For example, we are looking at hybrid seeds, a very important theme. For example, stocks like Kaveri seeds. See, what's going to happen once the new MSP comes into place is that you're going to be compensated for 1.5 times the cost of production. The cost of production includes high-end hybrid seeds, which can be included as part of the cost of production. So I think you have, the farmer now has the incentive to go in for hybrid seeds, GM seeds. All these things are ideas which they couldn't apply because of cost constraints. Today, I think with an assured MSP at 150%, you can argue whether it will happen, it won't happen. Practically it will happen, but I think at least there is an assurance of a 150% MSP, and I think that will induce a lot of people to invest in drip irrigation systems. So you have Jain irrigation kind of stocks, on pipes you have Phenolics kind of stocks. So all these what I call the support services for agriculture, I think those to me look to be very good. Of course, you can always argue the next level, agricultural income goes up, so demand goes up, FMCG. I think that's the next level of argument. But I think first and foremost, I would believe that the agricultural support services are going to be a big beneficiaries of this.
Right.
By the way, it's time now to take in some closing strategies. As we speak, Brent has nudged the $80 per barrel mark as well. Since November 14, this is the best, the highest level since November 14, and speaks volumes about what's happening in the intermediate period, yes, but how swift and sharp the rally has been. Before I ask Abhijit Pathak about what his thoughts are on some of the oil and gas names, let me first take a closing strategy from him. Abhijit, for somebody who's looking to initiate a BTST or STBT at the current point of time, what would you advise?
Actually, when I spoke last time, Nifty was well above 10,730, and now it has just fallen very fast towards 10,690. So I would wait for this to go back above 10,700 and then take a trade with a stop loss of 680. I need to see how this 680 holds. In fact, the low is 680.55 on futures. So right now, I wouldn't advise any trade and wait for it to bounce back above 10,700 and then go long with the stop loss below 680.
It's not just crude which is spiking though. Keep in mind, RCOM is at 65% higher. I mean, it's just unreal what's happening to this stock today or what's happened to this stock this week. I mean, this week's chart would show you a crest and a trough and then a crest again. Some dramatic moves that's happened to Reliance Communication this week. Okay, Abhijit, what about a closing? So I know you mentioned about the index as being one of the strategies. What about crude or crude-related stocks? You know, we're talking to Jay about that. He's bearish on OMCs. OMCs have reason to be nervous with crude doing what it is doing. But are the charts or are the options and the futures build up indicating any kind of trades to you? Would you initiate some fresh trades? OMCs, Reliance, you name it, any of the oil and gas names?
Yeah, on Reliance, 940, 945 is a good support, and I would not short Reliance at this stage. But last time I'd given HPCL long at 305 and for a 10% bounce which came, and that was all there in it. And now HPCL can be shorted with today's high as a stop loss, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes below 300 in the coming days.
All right, Mr. Hariyar, let's address what's happening in the realty space as well. One stock that stands out, of course, is DLF. What's your view here?
See, I think from a slightly medium term, if you take a 3 months perspective, I would believe that DLF looks great. A couple of reasons. Number one, I think if you look at the way the company has gradually reduced its debt, from around a 20,000 crore level down to about 7,000 crores, especially after the sale of that stake to GIC in the commercial business, I would believe that DLF is on target to get to a zero debt level by March 2019. That is the original plan anyway. Secondly, I think we are already seeing a very sharp pickup as far as commercial realty is concerned in Mumbai, in Bangalore, and also in Noida. So I think that is one thing that will work positively. Secondly, I think the housing sector, which has actually been extremely back-ended throughout, I think that is likely to see a push probably by end of this year, early next year. So if you add all these things up, I would believe that DLF, with almost no competition right now in the northern region, to me looks to be a very good bet. We are targeting about 250, 260 on the stock in 1 quarter.
And is this the best idea in the realty space, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a realty idea, it's just a good bet in the markets in general?
See, if you're looking at realty development per se, DLF is probably the best bet. But if you're looking at realty beneficiaries, I would still believe that there's a lot of value in housing finance companies as compared to the pure real estate companies.
All right.
Okay, as we get ready to wind down trade, and just before we get into the market wrap mode, just want to bring up what's happening to some of the other names while we're talking about what's happened to ADAG Group stocks on the upside. Look at what's happened to PTC India the last few days, down about 9% today as well. Century Ply is looking slightly wobbly, about 4% lower today. And TVS Motors continues to grind lower, 3% lower today. PTC India, Abhijit Pathak, do you track it on the charts at all?
Sorry, I didn't get the name of the stock.
I was asking you about PTC India, Abhijit.
No, the connectivity is not good.
Okay, let me just take one final try. Abhijit, before we thank you, if you had to use options to hedge your positions on any of the key indices, what would you do? Are you doing something right now via use of options, either the Nifty or the Nifty Bank? No, I think we've just lost Abhijit Pathak. Can't get through him. But Abhijit, anyways,
Go with any long positions, like I said, unless Nifty futures goes back above 10,700 and below 680, it might go towards 640.
Okay. Abhijit, the slightly patchy line just as we wind down trade, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us today and giving us your thoughts. Really, really appreciate it. Just couldn't quite get through Abhijit Pathak well enough. Hari, you track PTC India? You don't. Okay. Do you track GSFC?
Yes, I think...
Under pressure today?
Yes, because I think the stock has performed quite well actually. If you look at it in the last few months, the stock has performed quite well. I think the stock only problem is slightly politically sensitive. I think if people who normally track the Gujarat stocks are aware of that. And with whatever is happening as far as Karnataka is concerned, there's so much of uncertainty. And so that is actually raising a question mark over what could happen in the power equations as far as Gujarat is concerned. So I think that is probably putting some kind of a question mark over GSFC. But I think that's more temporary. I would believe that the stock looks good. And as we spoke earlier, I think fertilizers again are a very good support sector as far as agro is concerned. So I would believe that leave out the temporary downsides, there could be a lot more upsides in the future.
Okay, but and again, speaking about fertilizers, maybe the best way, and is this an opportunity to buy into GSFC?
Yes, again, honestly, if you ask me about agro support, my preference won't be for fertilizers. It would be more for agrochemicals, hybrid seeds.
Right.
Probably fertilizers would come a little down because there is an element of regulation.
Right.
The higher extent of regulation on fertilizers, if you compare it with hybrid seeds or agrochemicals, the regulation is not so much. The regulation is a lot higher in terms of pricing, in terms of quantum of production. It's a lot higher in terms of fertilizers. So our preference would still be for either agrochemicals or for hybrid seeds.
Right. Well, there you have it. We just have about 2.5 minutes left for market closing, so I'm going to toss over to Neeraj to take us through the big movers when it comes to the benchmark indices. Neeraj, over to you.
We'll take you through all that's happened at close today, in the markets today. But at close, the Sensex and the Nifty have come off quite a bit. Actually, the Nifty Bank has scaled back from the lows. It was down 0.5% when we started the show. Now just about 0.25% lower. So that has actually inched up a bit. The Nifty by itself hasn't. I don't know if it's got to do with crude and some of those related stocks, but we'll get to know in a bit. The mid caps and the small caps, by the way, seem to be doing okay. The market breadth, remember, at the start of the show and even right now, seems to be okay. But bring up what's happening to the index names. And on the gaining side, it's FinServ and Finance, and to an extent, maybe Sun Pharma. I think there is merit in looking at this pack here. So let's get the camera down. Pull the camera down and talk about what's happening to the losers, because that's where the real merit is. Hindalco down 3.5%, UPL 2.5%, ITC 2.4%, a heavyweight out here. HDFC 2% down, a heavyweight here. We also have Reliance somewhere in the mix, which is also looking weak. It may not be in the top 10 losers, but certainly out there in the list of the losers as well. BPCL, HPCL, etc. have looked slightly wobbly. Commodities by and large have come off. So not enough gainers and a clutch of heavyweight losers, which is leading the market to do it is what it is doing. I'm sure that HDFC, Reliance and ITC would be amongst the top losers today. But Agam, what about the broader end of the spectrum?
Well, not looking too good right now. We are looking at a lot of weakness in several of these counters, though not necessarily the prominent ones, which is why I want to talk about some of the gainers in today's day of trade. Of course, in the last half an hour, 45 minutes or so, we've seen a sharp surge in a lot of these ADAG names. Reliance Communication leads the gains out there, up as much as 65%. We've seen good gains coming in through on Reliance Naval as well. One must keep in mind that these are relatively small price stocks, which is why that substantial up move, well, it's not such a big surprise. We've seen good gains in Reliance Power too. We've also had a very sharp reaction on Jyoti Laboratories on the back of earnings, of course. We've had 20% growth on the top line, largely on account of, well, the surge in volumes, and don't forget the added bonus here. That is the 1:1 bonus that the company has announced, and that is also taking the stock higher up. Among other counters which are also doing well in today's day of trade, with DCM Shriram, HDIL and Radico Khaitan. Radico Khaitan has had a relatively volatile previous few weeks, but its earnings were really strong, and I suppose that's what these traders are building on. On the losing end, of course, we've had a lot of weakness in PTC India, as we've just spoken about. GSFC, of course, looking at a bout of profit taking. Well, we had mixed earnings coming through for that particular counter. And Time Techno, this one is an interesting one because we have a lot of HNIs invested in this particular stock. It ended with sharp cuts of around 6.5%. On the whole, we're looking at, well, a fairly evenly poised when it comes to the advanced decline ratio, though it is towards the declines, and we're going to have to wait and watch whether or not this trend carries on as we move into the next few sessions as well.
Yeah, I think that's the summation of really what needs to be pointed out. Just final thoughts from both me and Agam before we ask a final question to Hari as well. Bring up the market breadth. Agam was talking about the market breadth. Let's bring that up because it was in the positive when we started the show. Marginally in the positive as that even now. So about even Stevens really. The turnover should be interesting. Today, being a Thursday, you would anyways have higher F&O turnover, options numbers, but the cash volumes as well, Agam, at 30,000 odd crores.
Right,
looks
so
to be okay.
I do remember that the record in terms of turnovers is a little over 15 lakh crores. It's not too far if you consider the F&O. And you know, as Navneet and I have been constantly pointing out over the past couple of days, a lot of this is to do with the churn in options that we've seen. To a certain extent, this could be attributed to the elections, the Karnataka elections. That said, given the fact that we have seen so much churn, maybe not so much when it comes to the change in the index on an absolute level, we could very well expect a sharp move going into next week.
Well, let's wait and watch if that happens or no. And the contributors, lastly, before we take a final question with Hari, the contributors, well, Bajaj Finance, no surprise out there. But look at the list of gainers, not enough heavyweights out there. The list of losers, 3 heavyweights which lost out a little bit and therefore putting pressure on the index, and the index ending up way lower than what was otherwise thought of. Anyways, final questions with T.S. Hariyar and Hari. What would your basic presumption be? Would you put large buckets of money to work currently, looking at what happened in the numbers, or would the geopolitical tensions and oil and US yields at 3.1 deter you from doing so?
I think not so much about geopolitical tensions, Neeraj, but I think we are a little more worried about oil. I think $80 is not a great situation to be in. We are a lot more worried about the rupee, because I think we're already at 68 plus, and I think that's not very comforting. So I think it's more about oil and rupee that we would probably wait and watch. I don't think we would really jump into the market to buy at this point of time.
Okay, not jumping in at this point of time to go and buy in the markets. That's the point that T.S. Hariyar is trying to make. I think that's about it on this leg of Countdown. Hari, take a moment to thank you for joining in today and giving us your thoughts. Really appreciate your time. And it's a wrap from Agam and me and the team that put this show together. Thanks so much for watching. Lots happened, Agam. Reliance Communication, Naval, Jyoti Labs. So look forward to your market wrap coming up in moments from now.
Yes, do watch.
Busy with Agam, yaar. We're not